Listen to Tony with me, Anthony Lansky. Today's guest is Miena Amiri. She's a physician by training, and she became the global portfolio lead at one of the top pharma companies. And now she's building a new company with a mission to enable pharma and life science companies to make data-driven portfolio management decisions 100x faster. And before we get there, I kind of looked through your profile and I was curious, like, these big pharma companies, they're like a black box, and just you worked at Merck and it's like valued at like 260 billion, as like thousands of employees, it's like 350 years old. Like, not many people can say they worked at a company that's that old. How is it working at a company like this, and what does big pharma do?
It's absolutely amazing. I have to
Yeah.
say, hey Tony, great, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's actually incredible because it is definitely inspiring. I mean, it's actually the oldest pharma company worldwide, so it's quite impressive. And I was also super impressed when I started there. They have a company museum. You can enter there and really explore the history. It's super great. And what also fascinates me as a physician is how different medicine was also these days, right? So
Mm.
it's that they have like old mummies and they show you how they produced medicines out of there. So that was quite impressive, not only to learn what is the oldest pharma company doing, but also like how medicine worked actually in the past and how clinical trials, how different it was. So only in the 80s or 1976, if I'm correct, there was the new German Arzneimittelgesetz. So it's a law basically that regulates how to do clinical trials. So everything that is totally normal for us today was very different back in these days. So I found it extremely impressive. And how is it working for Merck? I mean, Merck is an amazing employee. To be honest, they are extremely fair. It's a family-owned company, and you can really feel that spirit. So they're extremely, they support you. They try to
Mm.
develop you. They really offer you opportunities. So, for example, for me, also working as a physician, as a portfolio manager was quite of a stretch, but they trust you and they really develop you. So I could always recommend that.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
ended up being at like the CEO office, right?
yes,
It's
that's true. Yeah, that was actually my first job. So I've entered the company as a project manager in the CEO office. It was actually a specific division. It's called Strategy Realization Office. It's a minor or tiny team that is actively supporting the CEO office to drive some of the larger initiatives across the industry or across healthcare, basically. And yeah, that was an amazing experience. I mean, I was quite young, naive, didn't know anything, and entered the pharma world. But it was a great opportunity to get a broad view of how pharma in general works and also, yeah, gain project management skills.
how does it work when you're at the CEO office, you're a portfolio manager, you have at your disposal probably thousands of employees. Like, I think Merck is like 68,000 or something. Like, you dream up a project, or and then you kind of like, because it seems like it's so big that it almost is hard to imagine, like, where do you even start? Like, how do you get the ball rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, so the way how it works is
Because I never
usually,
worked at a company
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
big like
I
this. That's why I'm
know,
so curious.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's extremely structured, right? So you have your healthcare business that has a few thousand people, that's right, but they are also in different divisions of the company.
Mm.
So the way how I like to explain pharma in a very easy way is they say they have like three main areas. Thinks if someone from pharma now listens to that, they will kill me. But for the sake of explaining in an easy way, you have the R&D folks or the R&D space where it's all about the scientists and research and basically finding out what will be the molecule of the future, what are the drugs we want to produce to serve our patients. And then you have a second division, which is the manufacturing area, right? So once you have a few tablets, how can you ensure to deliver millions of patients globally? So there it's all about the production, the supply. And then you have a third space, which is the commercial and medical space, right? So how do you ensure now that you have the super drug that people actually know about your product? So you need your doctors and physicians that basically bring it to the congresses, inform the doctors, explain to them, also coordinate studies and all those things. And then you have the commercial people who are thinking about the strategic ways of how you can best, in terms or in the interest also for the company, optimize your portfolios and think about what would make sense, what kind of initiatives should you drive to ensure that your company is growing. So you have very different divisions with a lot of people, and then you have different layers, right? You have the global layers that are working more on the strategic topics and oversee the countries, and you have the regional layers that are somehow also bridging local and global teams, and then you have local teams that are representing every country and really make sure that the country businesses work. So I would say it's actually not that different from a small business. I think it's more the
Mm.
bringing all those little businesses together and then managing it centrally. So I, as a project manager, to make it more tangible, it was not that I was responsible for that many people. I mean, that's totally not the case. I was a quite young, naive employee starting in the pharma world, and I was basically responsible for very specific projects. So you have a project team, you have continuously thousands of projects ongoing in such a company, in such an environment. But there were specific projects where I was part of the project on behalf of this team in your office, and I could basically support. So it could be from legal projects or clinical trials, supporting them, or also in the manufacturing organization, transforming teams and so on. So it could be very different things. And then you will bring brought in as a project manager, and then you basically help you scope the project. You think about what our project goals, how to get there, and what you need to
Could you
do.
choose which product you wanted to work on, or were you more like a fire department where they call
I
you
would
up to?
say both. So I had in the time as a project manager, so I've been working the first 2 years as project manager, and then the other 2 years as a portfolio manager. So the first 2 years, I would say that in our team it was a very good balance. So I had two managers, so experienced also different ways of working, but in both cases we had projects that were clear. So if your board members want to do that, and you have to do it, of course you deliver on it. But what was always great, you can talk to them, right? You can discuss what project you should work on because you're, of course, more people, so you can also
Mm.
discuss and choose what kind of projects are interesting for you, and also which role you would take on, right? Because in the beginning, when I joined, I was a newbie, so the question was, how can I really add value and how can I really learn really fast? So it's not that much that you drive the project on your own, but really support someone who's more senior. And then after a while, of course, you're getting faster, better, you're connected to the people, you know what to do. And then, of course, you can also take more leadership on that and, yeah, really drive the projects on your own. And then also support the other younger colleagues to basically come up and
Mm.
get on full speed.
When you mentioned that it's like it's a global company, has these divisions
Yeah.
on different levels, and it does touch like it's not you're selling cars, you're selling products that improve like people's lives. And I'm curious, like, how do you look, for example, at competition, right? Because there are a few like big
Mhm.
pharmaceutical companies. Um, like, how do you know, like, because ideally you would all like cooperate, but that's not the nature of business, right? And I was always just curious, like, huh, like why aren't pharma companies like state owned, for example, right? Or would that make it much slower? Or
Yeah. So I think I personally, the way how I experienced it, of course you have competition. I think that's also always healthy, independent of the
mm,
environment. But on the other hand, I have to say I've seen a lot also cooperation, and I also believe that in the future it is about synergies. Also, not only pharma companies, but working with the government, working with institutions, with universities, startup landscapes. So I think it's a whole ecosystem and we can actually benefit if we work together. And I've seen this in many examples. So that is something I find actually quite impressive because in the end, you have such a purposeful topic, right? I mean, you have the patient and you want to improve medicine. And also, I always had the feeling I'm a physician, but I'm still delivering for the patient. So the patient interest is always in the center of everything you do. And of course, these companies also have their interest. They need to grow. They have shareholders, and you need to ensure that you in the long term grow. But synergies are there, and there are a lot of opportunities also. Like um, you can, for example, together develop things to de-risk. For example, if you have rare diseases, you want to take
mm.
joint risks.
Was that the case with COVID? Because
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
okay,
So there are so many examples. Also, I think in the future, for example, antibiotic resistance will be a huge topic. So there are companies coming together, institutions, universities working together on that because it's maybe not the most profitable area, but is such an important area where we need to ensure that we have access to new medications for the patients to ensure that this will be not the next pandemic. And there I would say I've never really experienced it that you kind of try to ignore the competition or neglect them, but really look for synergies and how you can work together. And I think that is in a trend that will be definitely increases in the future.
At what point do you kind of stop the cooperation and start the competition? Say you're working on a very important problem, because like say like COVID, right? There
Yeah,
were like 4 vaccines, and I was like, which one do I choose? At what
yeah,
point do you decide? Okay, now we've worked out the
yeah,
basics, and let's see who's going to be first to market. And
yeah.
like,
I mean, the question is also, right, for example, for us, how we, of course, we do our analysis. Now, in my next job as a portfolio manager, I was responsible for two areas. So the portfolio I was leading and that very specific product portfolio in the general medicine space of Merck. It's called CM&E, cardiometabolic and endocrinology. But in that space, I was responsible for a very particular product portfolio. And my second job was that I was also leading there some strategic projects supported to basically define our strategy, where we want to go with our franchise in long term. And that was quite interesting because one of those strategic questions was also how much do we actually grow from our organic pipeline versus inorganic, for example, buying new products, right, that
mm,
fit complementary into your product portfolio. So, for example, if we say at Merck, we are the leader worldwide for diabetes, cardiovascular, thyroids, and we are a key player for endocrinology. The question is, this is your established portfolio that you have already for many, many years. How can you ensure? So we're still growing fast, but how can we ensure that in the future you also bring in new products that fit nicely into your portfolio? So you wouldn't go now for a totally different products, but something that fits nicely in your portfolio. So, for example, if your patients get already treated with glucophage for diabetes, for example. That's what they get always as first line treatment. If they have to escalate their therapy, which type of fixed dose combinations are they taking as a
mm.
next step? Would that be something you want to bring in, for example? So those type of discussions and questions, they are really important. And there I find it actually very impressive because you always work together with other companies because you're shaping your portfolio, they are shaping their portfolio. So the question is who has which synergies, who's working on which fields. So you
Yeah.
sell and buy stuff. So you're anyway always working with other companies and they are your competition. But on the other hand, you also really help each other a lot because you maybe something is more interesting and more valuable in Merck's hand, whereas it is less valuable in someone else's hand, right? So
How do you know though? Like when there's like an overlap, right?
mhm,
Like what happens then, or do you have like because you own the intellectual property, you almost have a monopoly on a given drug
yeah. I mean, in reality, that's not the case, right? Because you have these brand name companies or the original
and then generic
companies, and
ones?
then you have a lot of
Yeah.
generics. And I think it's also healthy, right, for the patient in the end. So, but um, so I think it's a healthy balance. So I don't want to give the impression that there's no competition. We really
Mm.
know very well our competition, and we also, of course, want to track them also with our new software. Actually, that is one of the centerpieces. But on the other hand, I just want to explain that there's also a lot of synergistic effects and that those companies are actually working together. They're talking to each other. How do you know? You talk to people. So you know how they are basically, what kind of products they're focusing on, which therapeutic areas they're focusing on. So that is something that is publicly known. So you can look into their products, at least the more large ones and so on. And then you start thinking, right, what could fit nicely into your portfolio? And then you start debating with them. So you have your business development people in your company, their business development people, and start discussing, debating, and so on.
Got it. And I, as a consumer, when I go to the pharmacy, there are generic drugs, and then there is like, say, a branded one. I usually go for just the branded one because it seems like that's gonna be the healthier option. I don't know. Is that true, or like, how do I know which one to choose, and when is it better to choose the branded one versus generic one?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a very, very good question, right? Because as a physician, I also always learned one of the rules is you go for what is affordable for your patient, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we were also really known for our branded brands, right? And or branded drugs. And I've had a lot of debates about that because this was also important to me, right? You want to be as true as possible to your
Mm.
patients. And I think one really an important point is that in the end, what you want is to have a drug that works and has the greatest quality and is pure, and you
Mhm.
know that you get what you're asking for, right? So what is quite interesting, you see differences in different regions, right? So I think in Germany we're very used to it. You go to the pharmacy, you get a drug. Most probably it is what you expect to be, right? But in some other parts of the country, maybe not. So you never know. So who packaged that? So actually, drug fraud and
Parts
medications
of the
and
world, not the country, right?
yeah, of
Yeah,
the world.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You maybe don't know what you get. And then you see that also the behavior of the patients are very different. So they really like and crawl for, they really crave for branded products because they know they are produced in Germany, they are from a German company, and they must be high quality, high
Mm,
standard. And also in general, if you think about why did Merck grow that much? So Merck is actually known for the extremely high quality standards, also because we have very high regulations, right? So you have the regulations, it is overseen, and you also want to produce the best quality of the product. And that's why people associate that with Merck. And I would definitely say it also makes sense.
got it. So now with this in mind and how the process and cooperation, so that's I guess step one in the drug discovery process, right? Just you bring together incumbents in the industry, start discussing like, hey, there's this problem, how do we solve it? Um, but how does it happen? How do you get a drug to market? Say like I realize that I don't know, my mom has, or my friend or whoever has like a very rare disease and no one's solving it. And then I realized that this should be my life mission to help fix this in whatever way. Um, and say I have your skills as a physician slash also like I don't have a background in the medical field, but if I did, how would I start and like what how long does it take to even get a drug out to market?
Yeah. So I also have to say I'm not really a scientist, or I'm maybe not the best person to talk to. So someone from the R&D space, they're definitely better than me to judge on that. But in general, I would say it's an extremely exciting journey, isn't it? I mean,
Mm,
if you think about it, from the molecules you start screening, basically, that could have an impact, or you maybe think that this could be a product that one day helps patients. Do you have an idea how many molecules you have to base your testing along the clinical trials, and then one of out of those will be marketed at some point? What would be your gut feeling?
uh,
Just say something that comes to your mind.
yeah, I'm kind of blanking out.
Could it be 50? Could it be hundreds or so? And then one will convert to a product to the market. What do you think?
I would say like probably 50. Yeah.
It's 10,000. So that's the crazy thing. I couldn't believe it when I heard it the first time. So 10,000 products will be assessed, go into trials, and all through all the steps. And in the end, one product will be really marketed. So as a researcher, you really need to be patient and also really be idealistic and believe in what you're doing. But of course, it's the most incredible feeling if you're basically your baby that you're working on and one day will come to the market and really serve the patient. But that also explains why it is extremely difficult, right, to do
Yeah.
the
Did you have
research. There are
10,000 teams or just like,
10,000 molecules that needs to be,
okay.
or probably in the beginning, basically acids that you think, okay, they can maybe really come to the market and be a product.
And how many molecules? Does the team just like take 10,000 and try all of them at once? Or are there a few teams you just divide it like, okay, here's 100, take 100,
Yeah,
take
so how
100?
does this work? So in the beginning, you have preclinical. So how does clinical trials work as a whole, right? So again, talk to an R&D
Yeah.
person if you want to know the details. But basically, you have different phases. So you have a preclinical stage where you sit in the lab. You know how roughly what the strategic approach of a company is, what you're looking for, and then you start screening molecules. You want to see which effects do they have, but also which side effects do they have, which interactions do they have, and so on. So it's really lab work, and you test and want to know how these molecules are working. And then if you think that this could maybe be helpful for a disease, you start basically testing. At some point, you will go enter the next phase. You do maybe some animal testing, and then you come to the next phase. You maybe do some tests with very small amount of people to see which side effects you have. So in the beginning, it's also more important to screen that you, of course, don't want to harm a person. So you have people you're screening just to see if there are any side effects, and then you get a bigger population. Then you have patients sitting there. Then you have a large patient population, and at some point, you actually bring the drug to the market. And once it is in the market, you will continuously even monitor then your patients to see how it is going. So you also take long-term data, and the whole process takes 7 years to 10 years or
Yeah.
so. So it takes a lot of time. Yeah. So definitely talk to an R&D expert and know it much better. But I think it's extremely impressive. So every time I go to the pharmacy and you're really sick and you take something, it's just cool that it really works and that there were people really figuring out how this works. And yeah, it's
Totally.
quite
And once you figure out a drug, is there like, when you have iOS and you upgrade it every now and then, they release a new update for
yeah.
your operating system. Does the drug need to be updated every, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, or once it's done and figure it out, then we can use it forever?
I love this analogy. That's kind of funny. I think kind of. I mean, of course, you wouldn't change the product itself, but of course, you always have new products in market, right? So you have maybe, I don't know, for example, for depression, there are very old drugs on the market, but then they have a lot of side effects also, so they're not really great. But then someone else, a new company, will figure out, hey, there's a new molecule, maybe that works better. It is either more effective or you have less side effects. Both would be reasons to bring in something new, right? And then if that is the case, you have a new gold standard. Of course, no one will use the old drugs. You will bring in the new drugs that works better and so on. So I wouldn't say that you take the same tablet and change it in a way, but you basically bring in new
Mm.
molecules. So there is definitely an evolution of things ongoing. It's actually a very interesting point because a lot of people are like, why is pharma so expensive, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you think about it, I once heard someone saying, well, in our department, we can build no new TVs, and if it's not the greatest TV, you can still bring it to the market and sell it, right? Because you've put efforts into it. You have people working on that. You try to something do better. Maybe sometimes it doesn't always work that it's really better, but you
But if the
still,
price is right, someone's gonna
yes,
buy
this
it.
price is right. You still bring it to the market. Someone will buy it. It's of course not that way in the drug world, in the
Yeah.
pharma world, right? Because there, either it works or it doesn't. And that can really hurt, right? If you're in a late stage, find out, no, it doesn't work, or another product is better than yours, then it's done. And you have spent several millions and billions for those products. So, I mean, R&D costs are pretty high, right? So it's really, either it works or it doesn't. And that's a calculated risk you have to take in the beginning. But that's a huge difference to other industries.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, like, that's why also probably the cost is associated with, like, is the do you do is the kind of potential litigation included in the cost? So, like, if anything goes wrong,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a
yeah.
risk game of risk, right? So you have very high returns and margins and profits, but on the same side, you have pretty low likelihoods that this will work out and it will be really, so yeah, good for the needs of your patients, right? So you have to calculate this, but it's definitely a challenge. I mean, that you don't have in other industries. Yeah.
Is there, like, a standard threshold for, like, how many tests, need to be passed for a drug to go to market?
Yeah, for sure. That is extremely regulated space. So there was this famous thalidomide case that really, I think, really changed the industry as a whole, where there was a drug. So in the past, it was managed in a very different way, right? So it was not that strict, not that regulated, and so on. And then there was this one case where a pregnant woman could take a drug, and then I think they did it for some headaches or so. I cannot tell you any more in detail, but they took this and then it turned out that their babies are having really severe issues after their birth, after they're born. And after that, that was such a public case that really changed the whole world.
Mm,
So the space is extremely regulated. And again, as a physician and also as a patient, I think that's the right thing, right? I mean, maybe sometimes it could be less regulated, but in general, I think it must be regulated. It's not the same like buying a TV. But
totally.
this also, on the other hand, puts the whole industry under a lot of pressure, right? Because there's a famous e-rooms law. So a lot of people know Moore's law about chips and how this is
Yeah.
changing over time. It's quite funny because Moore's law is also exists the other way around, e-rooms law, and
Okay.
this is specifically for drug discovery of pharma world. And what it says is that every 9 years, pharma innovation cost doubles or it gets double as high. So every 9 year it doubles despite technology advancement and so on. Yeah,
Yeah, how
exactly
come?
the way how you react. Also, people in pharma react to that because it's not extremely known. Of course, everyone knows that our drug discovery costs are increasing. That everyone knows, but that there is even a law. A lot of people are always quite surprised telling that. Look it up. You can find it on Wikipedia. It's quite funny.
Yeah. And it's like, is it just like, because of the amount of regulation and, like, population growth?
Yes, very good question. So why is this happening? Despite, I mean, we have such amazing technologies, and it's also extremely crucial that we have them and that things go faster in the future. You can use artificial intelligence to accelerate the whole processes, and still prices are increasing. How can that be? So there are many reasons for that. Firstly, of course, because if you start basically identifying or do drug discovery for the first products, it's easy to find out the first easy little things. But then in the long term, it's getting more and more complicated to basically invent new drugs, understand diseases that were anyway hard. So it's easier to find easy things and it becomes harder to find the hard
Mm.
things. That's one reason. The other thing is regulation. So it's getting more and more regulation. So that's the challenge, right? On one hand, it's right that the space should be regulated. On the other hand, it gets so regulated that it's really tough and difficult to do clinical trials in general, and it
Mm.
gets more challenging also for companies. And the third thing is also pricing pressure. So there's a huge pricing pressure. For example, if you basically want to develop new drugs. And you immediately have, or you have, for example, rare diseases, you have a smaller patient population, then of course also the price point will change and so on. So in general, also your raw material costs and all those things that are increasing. So price is also something that is relevant. All of these factors in the end lead to that, or they explain why it is observed that since the 50s or so, that the cost for R&D is actually doubling every 9 years. And that's also something where we believe for us why we're working basically on the optimization of established portfolios, because we believe that this pricing or this huge pressure of R&D pipeline, so it's getting more and more expensive, is something you feel in the companies also in your established brands, because the assumption of, or the expectation of your profitability and really growing also from the old brands, this is something that is increasing, because if your costs on the other hand are increasing, the return of invest, so
You're in a
you're
squeeze.
investing but
Yeah.
what's coming out is getting less. What happens is that the company also comes under pressure and you have to basically also be more efficient in your existing brands. I mean, it's not that terrible, right? If you try to compare to other industries like automotive or so, you're always used to very low margins, so
Yeah.
everything is streamlined and optimized. And our hypothesis is that this was not the case for pharma in the past.
Before
So
we get there, I just
yeah,
wanna at
sure.
first, like, the third point makes a lot of sense because the bigger the market, the less like, say, like, you've cured all the major, like, for example, I don't know, like, migraines, like, you have a drug for that, and everyone has migraines almost, but then, like, it gets more niche and niche probably with, like, as, like, you kind of the markets get smaller, right? So, like, the third point really kind of, that makes sense, and I was wondering before we get into the or maybe how was your thinking because you left that environment, right? You've seen it, and then why did you even decide to tackle a problem like this and get out on your own? I know you had a little side hustle of like doing escape rooms. I wanted to ask you or something like that. But yeah, how does the journey start? Or did you just immediately kind of you had that idea when you were still working
Mm,
there and you said, okay, I'm leaving to start this. I need to do it now. If I'm not going to
yeah.
do it now, someone else is going to do it.
Yeah. I think it started maybe when I was 5 or 6 years old or so. So as a kid, it was a bit strange. I mean, I even in school, I think I sold like sweets, candies, and some cosmetic products to my peers in school just because I
Cosmetic
enjoyed it.
products.
Yeah. Like, of course, like for kids, like little lip glosses or whatever. So I started buying them quite cheap. And then there was always the big break, and I don't know, in school you have like 15 minutes or so. And then I saw that all the kids are always running to this little kiosk, and then they
Yeah.
were getting their sugar. And I was like, why are they paying this and why are they not? I can maybe do this on my own. So I started to bring in some sweets
No
and
way.
sold it
Did you have
to
like a
them.
little stand or
Yeah.
did you just like were you more like a kind of like a drug dealer walking around like hanging it out?
Yeah, I actually brought it to our class, so I did it immediately in the class. So I just distributed. I started with some friends I knew what they like, so I was like, "Hey, do you want to have this one?" And they were like, I mean, they were kids. I was also a kid. They were like, "Oh yeah, let's do this." And I was also eating some of the candy, of course, and then I just brought it for them as well, and they paid me instead of the kiosk. So it's a bit of a strange story, but I think that's how it maybe started, and later. I think that was maybe always, I mean, I don't know, but it feels for me that it was always clear that I want to have my own business, and that I not just to have the business, but more because I really enjoy it. I always see like opportunities how you can maybe improve something, how you do things faster or innovative, think it in a different way. And also from the customer perspective, right? What is convenient for them? And yeah, I think I also just enjoy it. I mean, my father also he was always a salesman. So my family's from Afghanistan. So it was always
No
like,
way,
yeah, yeah,
really?
yeah, yeah. So I'm also from Afghanistan. So selling things, I think it always helped a bit to survive also in our family history. And maybe it's in the blood, I don't know, or I learned it very early, but it's definitely something I've always enjoyed and always was somehow doing. And then as a med student, I realized quite soon that
Hey, why
everything,
medicine? Because, like, you have the sales, like, business
yeah,
acumen. Why didn't you go to business school or start your own business straight out of high school? Why choose, like, one of the hardest paths, which is becoming a medical practitioner? You have to spend years in an academic setting.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I basically finished school, I mean, I to be honest, I never thought I can be a doctor at some point. So it was more I was super interested to understand everything about the human bodies and our minds. I wanted to understand how everything works. So I guess it was a lot of curiosity. And then when I saw, okay, it is feasible, I can actually go to med school, I was like, I was super energized. I wanted to do it. I wanted to explore this field. So it was not that I thought, think if you're 18, 19 or so, at that point of time, you don't really think about what life conditions you want to have, how you want to work, where your strengths are, but you're more into the topics, right? So what is your interest field? So that was definitely something where I saw myself. I love people. I like to talk to people. I like patients. I like to help people. And I find medicine always super fascinating how things work. I could watch and read everything in that space for hours. So it was kind of intuitive for me, the right thing to
Did you watch
study.
Scrubs or Dr.
Yeah,
House?
for sure, all of those things.
Uh,
Yeah. So everything, but also more in the scientific way. Like I find it fascinating that also if you're sick, sit there and you really feel bad, and then you take some drugs, and after that you somehow get cured. I find that fascinating. I find it really cool, and I
Wait, so you
wanted to.
knew from the get-go that you're gonna study to be a physician, but you wanted to end up working at a
I mean, I
pharmaceutical company?
started medicine. Of course, you have no clue what's waiting for you there. And what I've been experiencing was that I love to work with the patient. I found that extremely meaningful. Um, I love to help people, and I also like that space in general. But what I also realized, I'm someone I like to also be explorative, test new things, and work across also on borders with with other professionals and so on, and not always in the same area. And I also like to scale things. Maybe that is also, I don't know if that makes sense, but for me it felt like I have to do always the same thing again and again again, and I felt like at some point it felt limited for me personally. I think that's
Mm.
also very different for everyone else. So I have a lot of friends there working, I don't know, in the gynecology department, so it really fulfills them. But I felt like I love the topic what I'm working on. I love the patients, but I have the feeling that I cannot bring in my strength and also somehow scale what I'm doing. So I had the feeling
You wanna go big.
I want to go big, and I also see that my strengths fit into another area. Whereas I think, as a physician, it's great if you're really an expert. You really become so. What is really great if you over time learn a lot, a lot, a lot in that specific area. I don't know if you're a gynecologist, you better know exactly what you're doing and do this
Yeah.
for the next 30, 40 years. And I see myself someone who loves to explore new spaces, jump into unknown spaces, and really do different things. I'm not that much of an expert, more an all rounder, I guess. Um, and yeah, and then I thought at that point of time, I'm also not someone who's then saying, well, that's life, better take it. At that point of time, I was thinking, okay, now as a student, I have limited resources, limited time, and limited money. So what can I do? I want to start a business, but something I can also do as a student. And at that point of time, I had access to pretty cheap rooms.
Were
And
you how was that before or after the experience also? 'Cause I noticed that you were in Dubai for a while. Did that also? Because like, for me or, like, for a lot of people who kind of get out of their usual environment, you're studying in Germany, right? And then you spend,
yeah.
like, 4 months in Dubai. Was that also something that made you reflect on your path or, like, who you are as a, medical practitioner?
Yeah. Dubai was later, so this was my practical year. So as in the last year of your med studies, you do usually a practical year, so you can rotate in different hospitals and work there as a med student. Your first steps as a doctor, basically try and test. Um, and that was a later point of time. So the little side business came, I think, after my fourth semester or so. This was after the
Alright.
first examiner. I had a bit more time. I was like, okay, as a super energetic person, I need a new challenge. So I was then building the little startup or just to try and test. And it was really cool. It was exciting because we had limited resources, but still we thought like, okay, where where do we have a right to win and where do we have access that maybe other people don't. And we had quite access to quite cheap rooms. We were super creative. So what we did is basically start a
Who's we? It's you and a few friends.
exactly. So it was one of my, or at that point of time, my ex-boyfriend and myself. And what we did is that we started a live Cluedo event. So what we did is we hired people like actresses or actors that could basically walk teams around different rooms of an old French hotel, and they had to basically do riddles and so on. So this was a team building event. So we got different companies and so on.
Ah,
At that point of time, as a student, I was rotating for internships from teams to teams, to different hospitals and so on. I thought these people are spending a lot of money for team events and they're always looking for something new. And I thought, okay, fine, anyway, I get to know so many different people, so I can
true.
invite them to that space. And that was
How did you
really
get
cool.
access to all these cheap places and actors also? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the actors, we hired them. Also, some of those people were actually my student colleagues. So that was
okay,
cool because I started also like hiring the people and so on. And the rooms, because my parents had access to some rooms and I could basically rent them cheap. So that was really a thinking of what resources do I really have? How can I spend my time? And then it was quite of a nice experience because from the idea to the launch, it took us 3 months. And then after 3 months, we were already profitable. So you could see how this little business is growing, and it was really fascinating. But I think back then I did it more really out of passion. So this was like I
mm,
want to do something. I don't want to, I don't know, work at Subway or so for 10 euro per hour. I want to do something on my own. How can I do this besides my studies? Because you're also quite busy as a student. How can I ensure that this will move on? So I chose this path, did this, had a lot of fun, a lot of experience. But I also learned a lot from that. So the business was profitable, but still the question was, is that something you want to scale? And is this something you want to do your whole life, right? Because I felt like, okay, it's so much fun. And it was also good to see that you can actually create value for people that are not sick. Sounds also
yeah.
strange, but it was fascinating because if you in the hospital sometimes help your patients, I had the feeling they were less happy than if you could give them great time with their beloved ones or with their colleagues and so on. So that was an interesting experience. But for me, sometimes I think at some point I also read Peter Thiel's Zero to One
All
and
right,
thought like,
yeah.
okay, it's not the best thing to do with my time because I would like to do something more technological advanced
But
and
couldn't you put it on
also
like
more in the
auto?
space where I have my knowledge. Sorry,
Yeah,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Couldn't you put it on autopilot? Like just hire someone to run it for you?
Yeah, I think my current co-founder, had a pretty smart solution. That's really funny because he's a physicist, has his experience on particle acceleration, and has been working at CERN and quantum technology expert and so on. But he also did the same thing, but as an app. So that was one of the first things where we thought that's so funny because he also had like an escape or something similar to this event, but as an app, so you could basically book his what he did. You can book a slot and then do some riddles across the city and so on. So that was really funny because we did the same thing, but in total different solutions. I think his thing is, of course, for sure, much more scalable. But it came both with challenges and so on. It was not our expert area. It was more something we
mm,
tried and test. I think we gained a lot of experience from that. But for me personally, at that stage, I realized then it was then the end. So it was the best job ever during my studies. We earned a lot of money. We made a lot of people happy. And I think we did a good job. But at the end, the question was, is that now something you want to scale? And now, for me, the answer was no. So it was more like, okay, I've learned a lot, but now I want to move on. And then the last year came with the Dubai trip and so on. So I had my practical year, and I've been doing. I was thinking like I was always dreaming of working somewhere abroad and getting also experience abroad, and also learning other healthcare systems was extremely interesting for me. So what I did is I did a rotation in London for 4 months and another rotation in Dubai, and then came back one rotation in the psychiatry in Hamburg. That was also really cool. Um, yeah, and that was I mean, that
how do you
opened
compare
my
like
eyes.
London to like Dubai? And never been to Dubai, but like you hear some things about like the also how as say as like a medical female practitioner,
Yeah.
like was it like a complete like different world or not really?
So yeah, there are very interesting questions socially and then professionally, right? So I mean, I have to say, my parents are from Afghanistan. I've been raised with the Afghan culture, but also all my friends were German, so I would see myself really as a mix from everywhere, or at least from my experience, I would say. Um, and it was also a bit, I mean, a challenge for me because unfortunately, I've never been in Afghanistan. I mean, the situation doesn't allow, but so this trip to Dubai was, I mean, Dubai is a total different world. They're a super rich country and so on, right? But it was at least going a bit closer to
Mhm.
the world of Asia. And yeah, and I was a bit afraid what will happen. I'm not wearing a scarf or a hijab or anything. And what was also quite funny because I told people there I'm from Germany, but there I realized for the first time that it doesn't make sense because Afghanistan is closer to Dubai than Germany, and they also don't understand why I call myself German. Okay, I was born here, but I am originally from Afghanistan. And that was the first time I realized how do I actually explain I am from Afghanistan, but socially I'm somehow very
Yeah,
German.
this identity question is probably a
And
fucking
also, my hard accent doesn't make it easier to explain that I'm not from Germany. So it was kind of a new experience for me myself, or for myself to position myself or how I see myself. But what I found actually more important was and more impressive and really great was the experience I made with the people from there. So I was so impressed by them. So I still have a lot of friends there with some physicians and so on, because that was actually the most remarkable thing that I found out that we are actually so biased. I am so biased. So because I
mm,
thought like, okay, how will they judge me? But by wondering how they will judge me, I was actually judging them, right? So it was super
true.
interesting because they were so open minded and really, I was so impressed. So I've been working in the hospital in the surgery department, and I had the greatest advisor on this planet, Hadil. She's a fantastic physician, and she was responsible for me. So she was a senior doctor there, and she basically um, tried to show me what I can do there. She brought me to the operation theater, and she let me assist her. She explained me things and so
Operation
on.
theater? What is that?
Where you do operations?
Well, why is it called theater?
Yeah, OT, or so they call it OT.
Oh,
You can
okay.
also call it,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah, they
yeah.
call it OT room or so basically. Or surgery room. I don't know how you want to call it, but yeah. So, and I've learned so much from them professionally. But what surprised me more that despite the fact that most of them they were super religious and had all their scarves and so on, but no one cared what I was doing, and that was one of the things
Mm,
that surprised me. And what I also loved about them is that they lived their religion in a different way. So they were more, I have the feeling sometimes in Germany it's more something you hide. So you're really part of the culture or German culture if you become a German. But for them, it was more people were celebrating different places they were coming from, and they also didn't feel like I have to do this and wear this, and that's why I don't have any rights. But more the opposite, they were actually feeling themselves so great that they actually feel themselves so worthy that they cover themselves and so on. So I personally, I don't do it, and I also don't want to do it. I don't believe in it, but I respected the people there, and I really loved
totally.
also how they respected me. And that's my dream is basically that everyone can just do whatever they want to do and believe, and you just want to make sure that people feel free and worthy, right? So, and that really impressed me because this woman I met there, they were really confident, they were really professionally very well
It's so
educated.
not counterintuitive, but like you don't
It's
think about
not
it.
intuitive, but it was really inspiring, and it was also really great for me to see where my biases actually is, and also how well you then connect to people. And yeah, I was always thinking like, oh man, someone should go there and make a movie about
Yeah.
these fantastic female leaders there. I'm still very well good connected with them. I went even to the wedding of one of those doctors, and I totally love them, but they really also inspired me and opened my eyes about my own biases and also about our own views on how female leaders have to be and not to have to be. So I found them quite inspiring, very inspiring,
Yeah.
actually.
I'm not fishing for like, that something bad could have happened, but there is like this narrative in the media, right? For
Yeah.
example, so you didn't see that much and you think it's overblown or it's just a question of perspective in terms of
Yeah,
like, yeah, they have to wear a hijab, but for them, it's not like they're forced to do it. For them, as you mentioned, it's like a piece of, or like it almost, it's like an honor for them to do it, and
yeah,
it's their culture, and they're not like they don't feel miserable about it.
yeah. I mean, I definitely think that there is a lot of media stuff going on that is
Yeah,
strange. I mean, I have, for example, I have cousins that are really religious and wear hijabs, and I'm not. Yeah. And I think in the end, what you as a human being, I think independent of your hijab or whatever type of life you're basically having, you want to be accepted by people, right? You define for yourself what you think is right and wrong, and no one can really judge that. I mean, who knows, right? So
true.
you should have the freedom to basically live whatever you want to do. So I think exactly how you maybe have to help people that get forced to do something, but this is independent of religious or whatever, right? You should help people who get forced to do something. But on the other hand, you should also embrace people who like and love what they're doing. So as long as it is not hurting someone
Mm,
else, let live everyone or let the people live however they want to live, right? So
totally.
I just I experienced a lot of love there, and I experienced a lot of confidence and happiness there. So I also felt that. Not that I just had great experience. I also had other moments where I felt like, wow, I'm really happy I don't live in here. Because, for example, that was when it comes to your own opinion, right? Because maybe not all or everyone sees it like that. So I had, for example, a discussion with one colleague who was a male colleague. He said, yeah, he think it's great that there are female doctors because his wife should also go to a female doctor, but for other things, maybe it doesn't make sense. And I was like, mm, okay, now I'm quite calm, but at that moment, I thought, oh God, I know that's you shouldn't say that. I
Yeah.
really wasn't fine with that. But on the other hand, I didn't know how I can react. So that's something I thought like, okay, here I feel pretty safe. I can always say what I was thinking. So I didn't know how much I can say it there. So I don't know. So I just want to say that I want to balance also my experience, right? So I made really, really great experience and other experiences where I thought, okay, I don't know how to behave here now correctly, but I think that's also normal,
It's
right?
also
Maybe in every society and you make your experiences. But in a nutshell, I would say that the most impressive thing was definitely the people I met and this fantastic, excellent women I've met there. Um, what I found also quite surprising was the medical standard and the innovation level of innovation there.
mm,
That was really impressive. I mean, they have massive resources there, right,
yeah, a lot of
for
money.
medicine, exactly. So they could also for sure afford a lot of great new technologies, and they really put their focus on the future and how can you improve and make things faster. And sometimes I have the feeling we're debating for hours whether we should have the electronical cards of whatever, where you have already 10 new time technology. In the meantime, you have already 20 new innovations that could you could basically apply. And there, I had the feeling they are much faster, and that was also quite of a surprising thing because I thought like, okay, German system, UK system must be very advanced in contrast to I don't know a system there that I don't know their med school when I was there it was just 10 years old, so I thought like in contrast they can't be that fast, but
Yeah.
they are, and that was also one major learning. It's very impressive to see what happens in other countries, and we sometimes believe that we're super strong and advanced, but then you see other countries and how fast innovation takes place there, and it's just impressive. Yeah,
Yeah, probably money's a huge enabler, and
yeah, and also I think also mindset.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, because they if you imagine, like, they started from almost scratch, like, 100 years ago, there was almost
yeah,
nothing there, and now, like, whoa.
yeah. It's
So
impressive,
it's
super
super
impressive.
incredible.
Yeah,
Um, and also just, like, what you mentioned about I was that kind of makes sense where, like, they would make it so, like, "Okay, it's okay to have female doctors or drivers or whatever," like, someone basically but it just to cater to their side of the population, so I didn't know it's that kind of divided, in also, like, why is it so that, like, when you're walking, for example, on the street, is it that extreme, like, you have a sidewalk, and I've never been there, that, like, men walk on one side and women on another, or
mm.
it's not to that level?
Yeah. I mean, what you see often is so you can walk on whichever side you want to walk,
Okay,
but
yeah.
you of course you have like your male groups walking together and your female walk groups together. I mean, it is a different society. It is what it is, right? So I don't know. I've been raised in also between different cultures somehow, And I mean, I always believe, or my biggest belief is, in the end, we all want to be happy, free, and safe, right? So I personally believe you should help people to get all opportunities, to get education and access. But then once you give it to them, they also have the right to live in a way what works for them. So, for example, I mean, I had always the feeling I don't want to, I mean, I don't see a reason why I should not sit with you in a room, right? So I met, for
Mm,
example, a doctor. He said, I wanted to give him my hand because I was used to it in Germany. You shake a hand and you get, if you don't introduce yourself in a proper way, to the staff, they feel like, oh, what a weird person and don't talk to you
yeah.
anymore. So to survive, you have to basically introduce yourself 100 times. And there I was doing
Survive.
this. Yeah. So there I followed the same standard protocol and went to them and basically said, hi, my name is Miena. I'm a med student last year and I'm here to support you and whatever. And he was like, don't touch my hand.
Whoa.
Because I didn't understand that he didn't want to shake a
Yeah.
woman's hand, right? I don't know. You can think whatever you want about it, but in the end, I mean, if he doesn't want it, it's okay. For me, it's okay at least. So I think I personally, if someone wants to stay in his male group, I think it's a different environment, different society. But who says that we know what's right or wrong? So I can only define for myself what I believe, how I want to live in my own
Yeah.
habitat, and I like to stay here with you. And I live like a quite Western person, I guess. But I think everyone should have the right to define how they want to live, as long as they're not hurting someone else.
Did you ever make a joke like this? Like when someone wanted to shake your hand over there and you're like, I'm not shaking your hand, you're my hand. So-
I can do that with you within the next days.
yeah.
I
I think
didn't
that would be
like
pretty, yeah, I think that would be pretty sick. Anyway, like I also wanted to get to like because you had one business which is quite unique because you understood even though it's a completely different field, but having that and then the experience in a big company which probably also shaped you, like you understood the structures, like you understood the rules of the playground, and now you can kind of or you can add value from a completely different angle. How did that come about? Like, did you leave because you had that insight? Okay, as you mentioned, the competition and how drug discovery is done, and what do you do with your portfolio?
Mm.
And then you decide, okay, I need to leave and start something now. If I don't, someone else is going to do it, or was it more like I need to take a break, and then suddenly this everything started to come together?
Yeah, it was, I think, totally different. So, as said, elementary school, selling some sweets, and then later having that little side business as a student. I somehow always knew that one day there will be this day when I basically have my own company. So that was somehow, I don't even think like a conscious decision, more like a gut feeling. I just envisioned myself as that. And at that point of time when I finalized my studies, I just had a good to refuse opportunity to join the strategy or SRO in the CO office as a project manager. I thought that's such a cool opportunity.
Yeah.
So I said yes. And then something happened I didn't expect. I loved that job so much. I really loved it because I found it so stimulating. I had so many, because that was also different to my previous experiences, because you're working with a lot of professionals, but from total different areas and different parts of the world. So you're working, I don't know, with some scientists, with some people who are the focus on supply chain, or others that are lawyers or whatever. So you have really everything in such a company, right? So that really inspired me, working for a global company across the globe with many different specialists in different areas where you can learn so much. And I also have to say that the company is a great company. So you
Yeah.
have really nice people there and they're
So
supporting
why come
you.
to like a factory, like a
Exactly.
co-working
Why go to a
space?
factory? And then I have been promoted to the portfolio manager. I had some great chances to have a good career there. And I loved my next manager as well. He was great. He was supporting me a lot. The funniest Australian I've ever met in my life. And we had really, really great times. And the team was also fantastic, the responsibility area. So it got really hard for me. So I thought like, okay, I wanted to have some business experience because then later on I can build my business. But you start progressing and
Mm,
procrastinating your initial idea, right, of having a business. But I saw, okay, I thought, okay, I didn't see this as an opportunity. I realized it is a lot of fun and I can do that. And I also see great opportunities to grow. So I was following this path. But then at some point it happened, and I read about Entrepreneur First, and that was again too good to refuse. So it wasn't really that I had a specific idea or something specific in mind, and that's why I stopped. I quit it.
Okay.
It was more that the program really attracted me because it's it offered me new opportunities I never had in the past, right? Because if I would found something on my own, most probably I wouldn't build a software company. I mean, I don't have any technical skills there. I mean, I
Hmm.
can read about technology, but I'm not an expert there. So I would say that Entrepreneur First was definitely a unique opportunity for me because it brings exactly that together, right? You have someone, maybe some professional background and experience in spaces, but then it brings you together with another co founder who has this technological skills. And what is also great is I've met a lot of people that told me, yeah, they're interested to build a business, but then boom, they got a baby, or boom, they
Got a
did something
raise.
different.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you move on in your career and people are not willing to go back, right? Take the risk, leave the great job with
Hmm.
career opportunities, and don't use your or have less money basically. So there are a lot of fears, I guess, why you wouldn't really start a business. And I think Entrepreneur First is doing is, I mean, I assume there are a lot of things you can do better, but what they really do in a very nice way is bringing people that are committed to build a business and that have a complementary skills, and you also have the time to focus, right? Because you do things. For example, my side business, I did it besides my studies, but it was not that I had 100% of my time for this specific thing. And what I also like is the short period of time, right? So you have 3 months and then you have to go to the investment committee. So you have a short time where you can pressure test a lot of things. And it's worth to spend this time because if it fails, then okay, you just lost 3 months, but you gained a lot of experience. But in the end, you have the opportunity to take some time where you really focus and do all this creative stuff you wouldn't be able to do if you would go to a normal job. So that convinced me to apply and to test, and I have to say I'm pretty happy. So yeah.
Yeah. What are you testing right now? How did it come about? Because you came with this open mind to the program, and then you met Alex, and it seemed like I was on the sidelines, but you kind of clicked immediately. You guys went to SF to like some like panel meeting, all that stuff. Like it seems like it's really progressing in a positive and like fast way. How did it come about?
That's a very good question. So, as an ex project manager, um, and someone who tries to do things in a very diligent, professional way, of course, I started with my spreadsheets already weeks or months before actually the actual program, and started to map people.
Really
I also have your head on my on my template, so I really mapped
long.
everyone. Try to also your picture. Try to rate everyone, so it kind of looks really crazy if you see it. But what I did is
Yeah.
basically I tried to figure out as soon as possible who's in the program and to meet people. So really talk to them. So I had like a spreadsheet where I said like, yeah, that person, what is the working style, the values, the beliefs, the educational background, the professional background. Did they ever had a startup or so? And then I really mapped everyone and tried to rate basically, and then categorize tier one, tier two, tier three co-founders. So some people were really making a lot of jokes about this, but it helped me to
Hey, you're serious
structure.
about this,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it helped me to structure a bit my thoughts. But what the real funny thing is that in the end, Alex wasn't even on my radar. Why
No
wasn't he?
way.
Yeah, so I think that's my learning, because maybe it helped me a lot because I mean Alex came quite late into the program, or I think only like 2 3 weeks or so before it started. He joined, and I think I had my approval already 2.5 months or so in advance. So I think it helped me already to know who's in there and to have several sessions with them. So get a gut feeling. Is that something I do? We have problem spaces and so on that are interesting for us, and also test myself, right? To what do I actually know? Where I think areas of interest for myself, and where do I see value and so on. And then I met Alex during the kickoff weekend. So at kickoff weekend, I was already okay. I know almost everyone. The few people I didn't met, who cares? So, so I had my candidates with my preferred people, or my list with my preferred candidates. And Alex, I met him, and he was like, I thought like, oh, what a nice guy, because
He's the nicest
he is
person.
the
Wow.
nicest person. He's like, it's just so much fun. We were walking an hour or so and explained to him how the human heart works, and he explained me quantum technology. And I was like, it's just fun to listen to this guy, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you think maybe physics, how interesting is that? If you, but he tells you things, you just sit there and think like, tell me more. I want to know it all. And not that he's like only the super friendly person. He's also really, I think, one of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, I'm really every day I'm so inspired and from him, and I can learn from him every day. And at that point of time, I more thought like, okay, he is this really impressive person. But I didn't at that point. I thought I didn't think too much about it if we want to work together, because I thought like, okay, he has such a different angle of things, and I'm from this crazy physician doing some portfolio management, and he is quantum technology expert. So I was like, okay, let's see what he's doing. But I think what somehow attracted us was that we were really productive together. So we sat together, we were just brainstorming more for fun, like what we could do. And at some point, we realized that there are so many things we could do together. And I think that was also the moment I realized, okay, I want to work with him, because not that I only saw how I really saw him as a leader. I can see how he's motivating, leading big teams, is super visionary, learns super quick and fast, is super smart, and is super complimentary also to me, because he's also from his personality to super different. But also because I had the feeling with this guy, I think we can test and learn so many things, but I'm really confident that we will find something, because if we withdraw something, there will be another thing we can do. So I think there
Mm.
are a lot of ideas we have together, and also our skills are so different that they really complement each other in a great way. So at some point, in the beginning, I was like, KEF have their standard propaganda, but at some point, I realized, damn, they're really right. That makes sense. Look for a valuable mark. Look for a co-founder who's complementary but still has the same vision, ambition, and also same working style. And on all of that, those things make sense. So I also learned it along the process. And yeah, then we just started working, and then you never know how it goes, right? I mean, I think we were also just pretty lucky because it turned out well. It could be also totally different. So I think there's also a lot of
Well, still early days, but so far it's
early days, right? So I think it's definitely a coincidence. But then we also travel together as co-founders. You don't have a lot of money, so we also share like the same apartment, the same room in San Francisco, and so on. So you're really 24/7 together. But I had the feeling the more I spend time with him, the more I actually really like him. So it's a great feeling. We also went into the redwoods forest and so on, did some trips together just to also see how we work together if we're out of the EF bubble,
yeah,
how we still work. Yeah, and I have
that's incredible.
yeah, it's incredible. And I think somewhere I heard this, that if you with the right co-founder, you feel like 10 times better or 10 times more productive or
Mhm.
faster. I feel like this guy, I feel 1,000 times stronger and faster with him. And I also like looking at him, I'm always like inspired, and I just enjoyed working with him. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward what's gonna happen with this, and,
Same.
but it definitely I can feel the energy when you guys are at the
Yeah.
office and when you're working. I usually ask the same, closing question. What's your advice to just people or, like, like, you would give to your younger self or your future self? Do you have some kind of, like, philosophy or wisdom that you kind of live by?
Yeah, I would say be confident in testing as many things as you can. So I think especially in your 20s, you don't need to really already master something. I think it's more about gaining experience, and the more experience you gain, the more you better understand what you're good at and where you can create most value for the people around you. So I think getting to know yourself by really putting yourself into uncomfortable situations and do a lot of experiences, and also don't listen to people to tell you that's not possible. I think that was difficult for me. I still always tried to ignore it and did it, but in the end I would even be more proactive and say, okay, don't listen to those people. Just try what you think is right, and just test also. And if you fail, who cares? You're in your 20s, and later you can still improve. And for sure, always don't worry and be happy. That sounds so cliche, but honestly, I think we worry too much, and we should have a lot of fun by independent of what we're doing. I think we're pretty safe in this country, and things are going well, so we should be always happy, I guess.
100%. Yeah, it's good to hear that, especially these days when people are a bit, like, worrying and thinking of, like, problems that don't even exist sometimes,
Agree.
so,
And don't
uh
take life too serious, maybe.
yeah, yourself life, yeah, make it count, I guess, and really like test things. You said in your 20s, but I think overall, like I've been talking to my parents and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna retire, or we're just gonna chill." And it's no, you can still have like 20 years of your life left. Like
Agree.
explore.
Absolutely.
This was a absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mina.
Thank you, Tony.
Have a good one. Boom.